The scream shattered the quiet morning in the neighborhood. People rushed out of their houses, and what they saw made everyone freeze. The mother-in-law lay on the floor, her clothes partly burned, her skin blistered, steam still rising from her body. And there stood the young daughter-in-law, trembling, a kettle of boiling water still in her hand, her eyes filled with both fear and anger. "She insulted me first. I didn't mean to," she cried. But no one believed her. Not even her husband when he saw his mother's burned skin, his eyes turned cold as a blade. From that day, the whole town whispered that Amara was a cruel woman. No one knew that just a few months later, she would lie in a hospital bed herself, in pain from that same boiling water, as if fate had returned every drop. And the most shocking part? The person who came to hold her hand in the hospital was the very woman she had once hurt. Do you believe in karma? Tell us where you're watching from: Atlanta, Lagos, Nairobi, or Cape Town. Comment on your city below, and find out what happened next. The little house on the corner of Umuahia Street still smelled of fresh paint, but inside Amara's heart, everything already felt old. She had dreamed that after marriage, life would be soft mornings making tea with her husband, laughter echoing under the porch. But just 3 weeks after the wedding, she learned a bitter truth: not everyone wants to see you happy. Her mother-in-law, Mama Ifeoma, was a woman who had carried the weight of life alone. She raised her only son by herself, working odd jobs, stitching torn shirts late into the night. To her, no woman was ever good enough for her boy. The very day Amara stepped into the house, Mama looked at her with quiet calculation. "These hands," she said, voice dry and low like cracked earth, "do they know how to make cassava soup?" "Yes, Mama," Amara answered softly. "Knowing is not enough. You must make it good. That's how you keep a husband." The words dropped like small stones, but the ripples they left in Amara's heart ran deep. From that day, the kitchen became a battlefield. Each morning, Mama sat by the doorway, her voice rising and falling like a constant judgment. "The water isn't boiling yet, and you've already added salt? No. Wait till it's truly boiling. Girls these days only know lipstick. This house doesn't need beauty, it needs skill." Amara forced a smile, swallowing her pride. She thought of her late mother, who once told her, "Never let the fire in your heart spill through your lips." But sometimes, the fire in the stove and the one in the soul burn just the same. Kenechukwu, her husband, was gentle at first. He held her hand and whispered, "She's old, my love. Don't take her words to heart." Amara nodded. But every time he left for work, the house changed, the walls grew colder, the air thicker. One day, Mama told her to boil water to wash the blankets. The bubbles rose. The steam prickled Amara's skin like 1,000 tiny needles. "Do you know why I always ask you to boil water?" Mama asked, her gaze sharp. "No, Mama. Because only when it truly boils do you see what's strong and what will melt away." That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She lay beside her husband, listening to his even breaths while her own thoughts bubbled inside. Was Mama testing her? Or trying to prove she was just foam, something that fades when the water of life boils too hard? The next day, Mama invited neighbors over for lunch. She laughed loudly and said, "My daughter-in-law can cook soup well, but I'm not sure she can keep the fire alive." Laughter filled the house, and Amara lowered her head, feeling her heart crackle like oil hitting water. That night, she looked into the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the glowing bride she once was. Her eyes were red, her skin dull, her hands rough from endless scrubbing. She reached toward the boiling pot on the stove. The steam fogged the mirror, and through that mist, her tears shimmered like glass. In the haze, she saw her mother's face, gentle, quiet, whispering, "My child, boiling water is only a test. Don't let it make you boil too." Amara broke down in tears. But just then, the door creaked open. Mama stood there. "Crying again? Such a weak girl. I knew Kene made a mistake marrying you." Her voice was cold, colder than the steam turning to air. I didn't mean—" "Silence. I can tell from the way you stir the pot a woman who can't stir smoothly will only let her life clump up." Her words cut like knives. Amara's hand trembled. The ladle slipped. Water spilled over, bubbling with all the anger she had held inside. As Mama turned to leave, Amara whispered, One day, Mama, you'll understand. Fire doesn't just burn, it also reveals. That evening, Kane came home. He sensed the silence hanging in the air. What happened here? He asked with a weary smile. Mama replied calmly. Nothing. Your wife just doesn't know how to boil water. Kane sighed, wrapped his arm around Amara. But as he turned away, Mama murmured, My son, a fire that's not controlled will destroy itself. Those words lingered like a prophecy. That night, rain fell hard. The sound on the roof echoed like water beginning to boil. Amara lay by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass, and thought, if boiling water is what proves love, then isn't every kind of love bound to burn? She closed her eyes, unaware that in that same kitchen, just days later, a single drop of boiling water would fall and ignite the fate of all 3 lives. The moonlight reflected in the pot shimmered like an unseen pair of eyes watching her. A sudden feeling came over her that the fire in that kitchen would not only cook meals, but would test pride, pain, and the patience of a woman's heart. If you've ever suffered in silence just to keep peace in your home, comment, understand, so we know you're still listening with your heart. That morning, before the sun had even risen, Amara was already awake. She wrapped her late mother's old scarf around her hair. Her mother used to say, every thread in this cloth is a prayer to keep you calm in the storm. But the storms in this house didn't come from the sky. They came from words. Mama Ifeoma stepped out of her room, her back still straight as the walking stick she always carried. Her eyes landed on the pair of slippers Amara had left, slightly crooked by the door. This house doesn't need careless people. If you can't line up slippers, how can you line up your husband's life? Amara stayed silent. She didn't answer anymore. Day by day, Mama's words dripped into her heart like water, small drops, steady drops carving cracks into her patience. Kenechukwu, her husband, began to change too. He used to come home, kiss her forehead, ask how her day went. Now, he simply dropped his bag by the chair and asked, Where's mother? No more. Are you tired, my love? One evening, Amara cooked dinner egusi soup, Kene's favorite. She served it and invited Mama to taste. Mama glanced at it, then said slowly, You forgot the salt. Or maybe you want your husband's food to be as tasteless as your face. She chuckled coldly, colder than the boiling water hissing on the stove. Amara swallowed her tears, her throat tight. She wanted to step outside for air, but Mama's voice stopped her. Sit down. In this house, a daughter-in-law doesn't leave the table before her elders. No one said another word. Only the sound of spoons clinking against bowls and the clock ticking each second heavy as stone. When Kene rose from the table, Mama turned to Amara again. You know what I fear most? That one day you'll boil water and forget to watch the fire let it spill over. A woman who can't control her emotions will one day burn herself. That sentence she didn't know was the match that lit the fuse. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She sat by the door, staring at the kettle still warm from the stove. Each bubble she remembered seemed to rise again before her eyes, showing her own reflection. Warped, weary, and lost. In her village they used to say, boiling water never lies when it spills, it's because the fire has been hurting it for too long. She touched the fading steam, feeling the sting, and wondered, am I boiling too? And no one sees it? The next morning, thunderclouds gathered. Rain hammered the roof like 1,000 accusations. Mama woke early and said, Boil water for my bath. Make sure it's hot, not lukewarm like you. Amara bit her lip, lit the stove, and set the kettle. The steam rose, blurring her vision. Behind her, Mama's voice droned on, calm and cutting. I told you, you don't belong here. You just want to take my son and his wealth, then run away. Amara's fists tightened. The water roared, bubbles bursting in sharp little snaps. She lifted the kettle off the flame, but Mama didn't stop. I know girls like you. Motherless, untaught, always crying instead of speaking. But tears don't move me. Then came a clang. The kettle tipped. A drop of boiling water splashed onto Amara's hand. She gasped, jerking back. Mama turned and smirked. See? Careless. Even the water turns against you. Those words, they turned her steam into fire. In that split second, reason and humiliation collided. Amara shouted, Enough! I am not your shadow, I am human too. And then one thoughtless motion. The kettle tilted. Boiling water spilled across the floor. Mama's scream tore through the rain outside. Amara froze. On the floor, Mama curled up, clutching her chest, her skin flushed and raw. The water spread like a wound between them, between two broken women. Neighbors rushed in. Kene stormed through the door and stopped at the sight, his face empty, his eyes hollow. Amara, what have you done? She trembled, stammering. I didn't mean to. She. But no one listened. The ambulance arrived. They lifted Mama away. Steam still filled the kitchen, thick as guilt. Amara sank to the floor, her hands shaking, the burn on her own skin stinging the same pain, in the same place. Outside, the rain kept falling, and inside her mind a quiet voice whispered, "It's never the last drop that makes the pot boil, it's the one that spills over." When Kene returned, he looked at her. "I don't even recognize you anymore," he said coldly. Amara lifted her hollow eyes. "And I was never allowed to be myself in this house." Outside, the rain beat harder. It put out the fire, but not the guilt burning inside her heart. Thunder rumbled in the distance, sounding like a warning from heaven. Those who start the fire will taste its heat. And somewhere in that cold kitchen, the kettle had cooled but still leaned to one side. A silent reminder that once water is spilled, no one can take it back. If you believe words can wound the heart faster than fire, comment, believe. That night, the Umuahia town hospital was crowded. Neon lights flickered across Mama Ifeoma's face, making her skin look pale and wrinkled. The doctor said the burns were severe, she would need a long recovery. Then came the question, who did this? Before Amara could speak, Kene's voice broke through, hoarse and trembling. It was my wife. Every eye in the room turned to her. Amara lowered her head, her hands trembling in her lap. She wanted to explain, to say it was an accident, that she hadn't meant it. But the whispers around her, nurses, patients, neighbors passing by, stabbed her pride like 1,000 tiny needles. The news spread like fire in dry grass. People in the neighborhood began to talk. What kind of daughter-in-law would do that to her husband's mother? These young women today have no respect. Shame on the Keen family. Those words followed Amara every night. She was no longer allowed to visit the hospital, Kana had said. Mother needs peace. Stay home. Home. That word no longer felt like home. The kitchen, once full of sizzling oil and the smell of soup, now smelled of ashes and silence. The bent kettle sat on the table, mute, like a witness who had no right to speak. Amara sat alone, listening to the wind slip through the cracks in the door. In her mind, she heard her late mother's voice again. Never cook with anger, my child. That kind of meal will only burn your soul. She broke down crying. Her tears fell on the floor, mixing with the dried stains of that cursed morning. And somewhere inside her, a whisper rose soft but sharp. The fire may be out, but the ashes are still hot. The next day, the police came to take her statement. Amara told them everything, the insults, the constant humiliation, the loneliness that wore her down. The officer just nodded, took notes, and said quietly, "Still, you were the one who poured the water. You're responsible." Amara didn't argue. She only asked, "Has anyone ever wondered why I don't cry anymore?" The officer looked up, confused. Because when tears have boiled, they turn into steam. The room fell silent. That night, Amara packed a few things and returned to the small rented room she had lived in before the marriage. The roof leaked, the bed creaked, but at least no one there called her ungrateful. She sat in the darkness, the burn on her hand still tender. It wasn't the water that hurt, it was the memory. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Mama Ifeoma finally woke up. She stared at the ceiling, her eyes empty. Kene held her hand and whispered, "Mother, I'll never forgive her." Mama slowly closed her eyes. She said nothing, but a tear slipped down her wrinkled cheek. Because deep down, she knew no one in this story was truly innocent. She had spoken words she should never have said, had lit a fire inside a heart too young to handle it. But she wasn't ready to forgive, not Amara, and not herself. Out in the streets, Amara began working again. She washed clothes, cleaned houses, earning just enough to survive. People pointed and whispered, "That's her, the one who poured boiling water on her mother-in-law." But Amara stayed silent. No excuses. No defense. One afternoon, while washing clothes by the river, she saw an old woman trying to light a fire with damp charcoal. Amara walked over, knelt beside her, blew gently, and said, "Fire needs wind, but not every wind helps it burn the right way." The old woman looked at her and nodded. True. Some fires, when they rise, don't warm anyone, they only burn the hands that lit them. The words hit Amara like a soft strike to the heart. She realized she had lit the wrong fire too. The fire of pride, of pain, of unspoken wounds. One evening, Kane showed up. He looked thinner, his eyes dark and weary, a mix of anger and sorrow. "Why are you here?" Amara asked quietly. "To tell you Mother is recovering, and she doesn't want to see you." Amara nodded, smiling faintly. "I understand." Los. He turned to leave, but she stopped him with one question. "Have you ever thought that if your mother had been born in my time, she might have been hurt the same way I was?" Kane froze for a moment, said nothing, then walked away, carrying silence like a burden of ash. That night, Amara lit a small candle. The soft light trembled across the cracked wall, touching her tired face. She placed a kettle beside her, for the first time since that day. But this time, not to boil water. She poured in cool water, added a few dried flower petals, and stirred gently. Warmth spread soft and healing. She whispered to herself, "Fire can burn us, but it can also make something sweet if we know when to stop." Across town, Mama sat by her hospital window. The moonlight glimmered on the water in her glass. She touched it cold, but calm. A memory surfaced. Years ago, her own mother-in-law had spoken cruelly to her, and she had cried all night. Now, she realized she had become the very woman she once feared. A long sigh escaped her lips. She murmured, "Maybe the fire in that girl's heart isn't so different from mine." Outside, rain began to fall, not harshly this time, but gently, as if heaven itself was washing away the last of the ashes. Two women, under the same sky. One bore burns on her skin. The other burns in her heart. And between them, a fragile thread still unbroken. The thread of pain, karma, and the words left unspoken. If you've ever known that some wounds come not from fire, but from staying silent too long, comment, "Understand," and let this story touch your heart. A full year had passed since that fateful day. The town of Umuahia had changed slowly, the metal roofs rusted a little more. The dusty roads cracked under the dry season, and the story of Amara was still whispered over morning tea. "The girl who poured boiling water on her mother-in-law," they murmured. But like every story, when the fire dies, people still need someone to keep them warm. Amara now lived quietly in a poor laborer's quarter. Each morning, she carried buckets for a fee, cooked porridge for the sick, and washed clothes for the elderly. Those who once mocked her sometimes left a small loaf of bread, or a handful of rice, on her doorstep. She never said a word, only bowed her head in silent gratitude. Her name, Amara, meant grace in Igbo, yet for a whole year, she had never felt forgiven. Every night, when she placed a kettle on the stove, she used only cold water, never letting it boil. She feared steam. She feared the sound of boiling, that sharp hiss that reminded her of guilt and memory. Then one day, fate decided to test her again in its quiet, mysterious way. That morning, Amara was hired to cook porridge for an orphanage. The outdoor kitchen was set up under a tree, and she stirred the pot while teaching the children how to wash their hands. One little boy asked innocently, "Auntie, why must the water boil to be clean?" Her hand froze. She looked into the pot, where white steam swirled upward. And in that mist, she saw Mama Ifeoma's face, aged, stern, and marked with a faint scar along her left cheek. Amara trembled. Her hand slipped back, and the edge of her dress caught fire. The flames rose fast, licking at the fabric. A scream broke the air. The burning pain shot through her leg. People rushed to her, pouring water, beating down the flames. But the burn was already clear, in the very same place her mother-in-law had once been burned. Amara fell to the ground, tears mixing with sweat. Through the pain, she whispered with a trembling smile, "So this is how karma balances itself." She was taken to the hospital. The white room smelled of medicine and disinfectant. And when she opened her eyes, the first person she saw was not a doctor, not Kane, but Mama Ifeoma herself. The old woman sat quietly in a chair, her eyes dimmer than before. No anger, no reproach. Just a long, deep look, as if she was seeing through Amara's guilt into the soul beneath. "Mama, why are you—" Amara began weakly. Mama raised a trembling hand, signaling silence. "You don't need to ask. I heard you were burned, and I knew God was teaching us both what we had forgotten, that pain isn't meant for revenge, but for understanding." Amara wept. Mama moved closer, took a cloth, and gently wiped the sweat from her forehead with the same hand that had once trembled from her own burn a year ago. "Mama," Amara whispered, choking on tears, "I don't expect you to forgive me." Mama smiled, faintly tired, yet tender. "I'm not forgiving you, my child. I'm forgiving myself, because I don't want to carry this burn in my heart to the grave." They sat in silence for a long time. Outside, rain began to fall softly, like silver threads. Mama looked toward the window and said quietly, "When I was young, I was a daughter-in-law too. My husband's mother once threw hot water on my leg just because I took the last piece of meat in the pot. I swore I would never be like her. But you see, child, sometimes we become the very thing we hate, simply because we never learned to forgive our past." Her words pierced Amara's heart gently, like light through smoke. Amara held her hand. "If I could go back—" "You don't need to," Mama interrupted softly. "God already brought you back in another way." She told Amara that ever since she recovered, she often heard the sound of boiling water in her dreams. "At first I was afraid," she said. "But then I realized it wasn't punishment, it was a reminder. When water boils, it's only cleansing itself." A tear rolled down Amara's cheek. "So, even water can be forgiven?" Mama nodded. "Yes, as long as the one holding the kettle knows when to put it down." She left the hospital at sunset. Before she walked out, she turned back and said, "Live your life, my child. When I die, don't light a candle for me, boil water instead. Because I believe water knows how to soothe better than fire." Amara watched her go, her heart heavy and yet, strangely at peace. Days passed. She healed slowly. One morning, the old nurse said, "The woman who visited you paid all your hospital bills." She left a note. "When water cools, remember it once boiled to learn gentleness." The message made Amara smile through her tears. She knew the scar this time would not just mark her skin, but carry a truth. Forgiveness is also a kind of justice. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. A child walked by carrying a kettle, steam rising softly from its spout. Amara pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "Thank you, Lord. You don't punish, you teach." That night, she dreamed. In her dream, she and Mama stood beside a river. They released two small, bent kettles into the flowing water. The river carried them away gently, like feathers in the breeze. The moonlight shimmered on the surface, no longer fire, but the calm, tender glow of understanding. If you believe that sometimes pain doesn't come to punish us, but to teach us how to love again, comment, light, and let the light of forgiveness flow through you. That evening, the hospital felt unusually still. The hallway stretched long and silent, bathed in pale blue light that hummed like the slow breathing of time itself. Amara sat by the window, her bandaged legs propped on a stool, her eyes resting on the small garden outside. Wildflowers pushed through the cracks in the brick wall, fragile yet unyielding, just like her. The door creaked open softly. Mama Ifeoma entered, wrapped in an old silk shawl, her steps slow and careful. Amara tried to rise but couldn't in time. Her voice trembled. "Mama, I didn't think you'd come back." Mama smiled faintly, the kind of tired smile that still carried truth. "I told you. We hadn't finished talking." She set a basket of fruit on the table, looked around the quiet room, then sat beside the bed. Neither spoke for a while. The ceiling fans spun lazily, sighing out weary air. Finally, Mama said softly, "Do you know, when I was the one lying in this room, I used to wish you'd come to apologize. But when you didn't, something strange happened. I felt lighter. Because I realized, the one who truly needed to say sorry wasn't you." Amara looked up, tears already forming. "Mama, Mama lifted her hand to stop her. "Let me finish. When I was young, I was a daughter-in-law just like you. I was beaten, called ungrateful, made to kneel in the kitchen under the noon sun. Back then, I swore that if I ever had a daughter-in-law, I'd never do the same. But the day you walked into my house, I saw my younger self small, scared, and powerless, and I hated that reflection. So I attacked you, just to avoid seeing my own weakness." Her voice grew rough. "I became the very woman I once despised." Amara bowed her head. Tears rolled down, falling onto Mama's wrinkled hand resting on her lap. "Mama, I never hated you," Amara whispered. "I only hated feeling invisible." Mama looked into her eyes, deeply. "When I was burned, lying in that bed, I realized how much love I had burned away in that house. That fire didn't just scorch my skin, it burned the bridge between me and my son." She sighed. "After you left, Kene barely spoke to me. He went to work, came home, ate in silence. The house had no laughter. I knew he missed you." Amara's lips trembled. "He still thinks of me?" "Yes," Mama said gently. "He never says it, but every morning I saw him stare at the dented kettle on the shelf. He wiped it clean, every single day." Those words broke the last wall in Amara's chest. In her mind, she saw Keen again, his soft eyes, his gentle voice calling her name, his laughter when they planted the banana tree behind their house. It all came rushing back, what was once a dream, now only a haunting echo. Mama took her hand and squeezed it. "I don't know if you two can ever be what you were, but I do know this. If I can forgive you, then you must forgive yourself." Outside, a soft drizzle began. The light filtering through the window fell in woven streaks across the floor like threads from heaven stitching back a torn cloth between two women. "Mama," Amara whispered, "I used to think when fire burns, all that's left is ash. But somehow, I still feel warmth." Mama nodded, eyes glistening. "That's right. Ashes are proof that fire once existed. And if the ash is still warm, then compassion isn't gone." A nurse entered to deliver medicine. Mama stood, straightening her shawl. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said. "There's something else I need to tell you. But tonight, my heart isn't steady enough." After she left, Amara lay still. Outside, the rain had stopped. A pale beam of sunlight slipped through the window. A sparrow landed on the sill and began to sing softly. Amara smiled. It felt as if life was gently blowing new warmth into a place once burned. The next day, Mama returned as promised. She carried a small wooden box and opened it slowly. Inside was an old photograph, Mama in her youth, standing beside an older woman with stern eyes. "This was my mother-in-law," she said. "She's gone now. On her deathbed she told me, 'Don't let anger blind your heart.' I didn't understand her then. Not until I met you." She handed the photo to Amara. "Now you see the circle has closed. Guilt and forgiveness always find each other, only at different times." Amara gripped the picture, her voice low but steady. "Mama, I may never erase that day, but I promise I won't let it define what's left of my life." Mama smiled, her eyes glowing softly in the afternoon light. "Then you've grown, my child." They sat together for a long while. No apologies, no tears. Only the warmth of two hands, one old, one young, holding onto something words could never fully express. When Mama finally left, Amara watched her go, feeling something lift from her chest, a piece of ash turning to light. She realized then, God doesn't always send miracles with thunder. Sometimes, He sends them through the quiet glow of a heart that learns to let go. That night, Amara wrote in her journal, "Forgiveness begins the moment we stop asking, 'Why did they hurt me?' and start asking, 'What can I do to make sure I never hurt someone that way?'" Outside her window, the wind whispered gently. She looked up at the sky and whispered back, "Thank you, Mama, for coming back." for teaching me that love can be learned again even when it's late. If you've ever seen yourself in the silence between a mother and a daughter, comment, understand, because sometimes forgiveness is how one generation heals the one before it. That afternoon, sunlight poured slantwise through the hospital window, turning Amara's hair to gold. She sat by her bed, reading softly from the old Bible a nurse had given her, whispering each verse as if praying to her own soul. When the light touched her face, one could see it clearly. She was no longer the impulsive girl she once was, but a woman who had walked through fire and learned to bow before something greater than herself. The door opened quietly. This time, it wasn't just Mama Ifeoma Kene was with her. He stood there awkwardly, uncertainty clouding his eyes. Amara looked up, her heart stuttering. A year had changed him thinner, shoulders heavy, eyes carrying the invisible scars of a man who had watched both love and faith crumble in the same moment. The room felt heavier. Kine stepped closer, his voice rough. "I heard. Mother still comes to see you." Amara nodded gently. "She's the only one who didn't turn away from me." Silence. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, time folded in on itself. They saw who they used to be. The young couple, full of laughter, before the boiling water, before the tears. Mama sat down in the wooden chair, her voice trembling slightly. "I came today because I'm tired," she said. "Tired of carrying fire for too long." She looked at her son. "Kane, you're not a boy anymore. You must learn to see with your heart, not just with memory." Then, she turned to Amara. "And you, child, don't be afraid. I've forgiven you, but now you must learn to forgive yourself." Amara swallowed hard. "I don't know how." Mama smiled gently. "When the skin is burned, we use ointment. But when the heart is burned, only tears can heal it." She rose, motioning for the two to draw close. "I want you both to speak not as two people who hurt each other, but as two souls who once loved." Then Mama quietly left the room, leaving them bathed in the soft golden light of late afternoon. Kene sat beside the bed. His voice was low, unsteady. "I was angry for a long time," he said. "Not just because of what happened to Mother, but because of your silence that day. I wanted you to beg, to cry, to explain. But you just looked at me, and that look scared me. It was the same look my mother had when my grandmother used to hurt her." He took a deep breath. "And that's when I realized we were just repeating the same pain. Mother treated you the way her own mother-in-law treated her. And I stood in between, silent just like my father once did." Amara listened, tears falling into her open palms. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I used to fear myself too. When that boiling water spilled, I didn't just burn her skin, I burned the goodness in me. But now I see, sometimes fire doesn't come to destroy, it comes to purify." The room grew still. Outside, the first drops of the rainy season began to fall, tapping softly on the metal roof like the sound of guilt being washed clean. Kine reached out and took her hand. "I'm sorry." Amara lifted her gaze. Her eyes shimmered like clear water after a storm. "I'm sorry too, Kine. Not for the boiling water, but for letting my heart grow cold." They sat in silence, their hands clasped. And in that stillness, amid the smell of medicine and rain, they could feel the broken pieces slowly aligning again. Not perfect, but enough for light to pass through. The door opened softly. Mama returned, holding a brand new kettle-polished brass, glowing in the afternoon sun. She placed it gently on the table. "I kept the old one for a year," she said quietly. "Today I bring this new one. Not to replace it, but to remind us that water can boil again, and we can choose to use it for tea, not for burning." Amara's tears spilled freely. "Mama, I don't know how to thank you." Mama smiled, weary yet peaceful. "Don't thank me. Thank life for giving us another chance. Not everyone gets to test their fire twice." She turned to Kene. "My son, if you ever love someone, learn to listen to the water before it boils. Because once it spills, no one can catch it." Kene bowed his head. He held Amara's hand tighter. "She's right. From now on, I'll listen not just to reply, but to understand." The three of them sat together, no more words, no more defenses, just quiet grace. Three hearts that had once been burned were learning how to touch again without fear. That evening, Mama left first. As she stepped outside, she looked up. The gray clouds had parted, and the moon peeked softly through. She exhaled, like someone laying down a lifelong burden. Inside, Amara looked at the new brass kettle. She placed her hand on it, feeling the warmth spread gently through her palm. No more fear. No more past. Only gratitude. She whispered. Fire was never wrong. The mistake was letting it burn without purpose. That night, Kene sat beside her, reading softly from the Bible. The last verse on the page read, "For he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more pain." Amara closed her eyes. Warm tears rolled down her cheeks, slipping over the old scar on her arm, but for the first time, they didn't sting. They felt like grace, as if God himself was using them to wash away the last burn in her soul. Outside, the moonlight glowed through the window, reflecting off the shiny brass kettle, a quiet reminder that some fires, when guided by love, can turn into light. If you believe that tears don't make you weak, that they're how God washes the burns from your heart, comment, believe. Because maybe today is the day your heart begins to heal. A month later, Amara was discharged from the hospital. Her legs were still weak, but inside her was a new kind of strength, not the strength of muscles, but of faith that had been cleansed through tears. As she stepped through the hospital doors, the early season sunlight touched her face, and the faint scar on her wrist glimmered like a silver thread of grace. Mama Ifioma stood waiting by the gate, dressed in a flowing white bubu with a light blue headscarf. Her steps were slow but steady. When she saw Amara, she smiled a warm, steady smile, like a lantern relit after a long storm. "So, you've learned to walk again?" she teased gently. Amara smiled. "Every step still hurts, Mama, but it's the kind of pain that reminds me I'm alive." Mama nodded. "Pain isn't the enemy. Sometimes it's the only teacher that makes us humble." They walked home together, the same dusty road Amara once took in tears. Now, two women walked side by side, no longer mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but two souls who had learned how to forgive. When they reached the gate, Kane was there, painting the fence, the same fence he had once built to keep his wife and mother apart. Seeing them, he dropped the brush and hurried over. "Mama, Amara, I thought you two would be longer." Mama smiled softly. "Don't you see? When people let go of anger, the road always feels shorter." Amara paused at the doorway, looking at the house. The walls were faded, the roof peeling, yet in her eyes, it looked like a temple. Every crack was a memory, every dark stain on the kitchen wall a reminder that love, if nurtured, can grow again from ashes. Inside, she stopped by the kitchen. The old kettle was still there, sitting beside the new brass one Mama had brought. One dented, one shining, 2 generations of mistakes and redemption resting side by side, whispering that the past and the present could coexist without fighting anymore. Mama stepped closer, gently touching the old kettle. "I never threw it away," she said, "because no one should ever deny their broken parts. Without this dented kettle, I wouldn't know how to cherish the new one." Amara stood in silence, her heart swelling. She looked around the kitchen, once a battlefield, now a sanctuary. "Mama," she said softly, "I want to light the fire again." Mama looked surprised. "You? You were always afraid of the stove." Amara smiled. "Not to cook for anyone, but to cook with others, women who've been hurt like me." That day, an idea was born. Together, Amara and Mama started a small women's group, part cooking class, part healing circle. They called it Warm Hands, Not Hot Water. Every week, women gathered in the backyard, widows, housemaids, wives, and mothers, to cook, talk, and share their stories. Some had cruel mothers-in-law, some had lost their marriages, some had burned their own dreams in a moment of pain. Mama became the storyteller, and Amara, the listener. They didn't teach perfect recipes, they taught how to light the fire again without getting burned. One afternoon, a middle-aged woman asked, "How do you stop hating the person who hurt you?" Mama chuckled softly. "Remember, water only stays hot if you keep it trapped in the kettle. Pour it out, and it cools. Let go, and your heart will stop burning." Laughter filled the yard, laughter mingled with tears, the sweetest sound the house had ever known. Kine often watched from the doorway. He saw his mother and wife cooking side by side, laughing, wiping flour off each other's hands. One day, he walked in and said, "Can I help?" Amara looked up, smiling through moist eyes. "You? Do you even know how to cook?" Kine grinned. "No, but I know how to stir the pot without making it spill." Everyone burst out laughing. Mama shook her head. "Good. Finally this house has a man who knows how to stir." That evening, they ate together. The soup was rich, fragrant, alive with warmth. Mama lifted her bowl, her voice trembling. "I used to believe justice was when the one who did wrong was punished. But now I know real justice is when the one who did wrong learns to love again." Amara set her spoon down, took Mama's hand. "Thank you for not letting me die in the past." Mama smiled through tears. "And thank you, my daughter, for not letting me die in anger." The room fell silent, only the soft rain outside and the quiet hum of the fire filled the air. It was the heartbeat of a home reborn. Later, Amara stepped into the garden. New vegetables sprouted in neat rows. Raindrops clung to the leaves, reflecting the golden light from the kitchen window. She smiled, remembering her late mother's words. "A plant grows only when it's watered, but pour boiling water, and its roots will die." She looked up at the sky. The rain had cleared, and the full moon hung bright and calm. "Mama," she whispered to the heavens, "I've learned to water with warmth." Inside, Mama sat in her wooden chair, watching through the open door. She saw her daughter-in-law tending the plants, her face gentle in the moonlight. And she whispered to herself, "Dear Lord, thank you for turning boiling water into light." On the table, the brass kettle gleamed softly, reflecting the golden flame of a candle. A drop of wax slid down, forming a tiny shape like a tear. Mama smiled faintly because for the first time in years, the house was breathing again. If you believe that love can still grow from pain, like plants after the rain, comment, light. Let that light of forgiveness reach those who are still learning how to heal. That rainy season moved slowly. On the old roof of Mama Ifeoma's house, moss had grown green and thick, and raindrops clung to the window frames like tiny pearls. From the kitchen came laughter, women's laughter, the sound this house had been missing for so many years. Amara was different now. She no longer avoided the stove, no longer feared steam. Every time the fire flickered to life, she smiled and said, "A fire hurts no one if we learn where to place our hands." More and more women came to her widows, young women once mocked by their villages, mothers who had lost faith. They came to learn how to cook, but really, they came to learn how to love themselves again. Mama Ifeoma often sat quietly in the corner, her eyes soft and wise. Every so often, she'd add a line that stayed in everyone's heart. "Don't fear boiling water, fear the heart that refuses to cool." One evening, after class ended, Mama called Amara aside. "My daughter," she said, her voice weaker now. "These past few days I've been tired. Maybe the fire in me is fading." Amara grabbed her hand, alarmed. "Mama, please don't say that." Mama smiled, that gentle, oil lamp smile, dim but warm. "I'm not afraid of dying, child. I'm only afraid of leaving without telling you everything I've learned." She reached into her pocket, pulled out a small envelope, and placed it in Amara's hand. "When I'm gone," she said softly, "open this." The words knotted something deep in Amara's chest. Days passed, and Mama grew frailer. She no longer went outside, but always asked that the windows stay open. "Sunlight," she would whisper, "is the only guest that never needs permission to enter." One early morning, just as the roosters crowed, Mama slipped away in her sleep. Amara found her lying still, face serene, one hand resting over her chest, a faint smile on her lips. There was no cry, no chaos, only peace, like a warm embrace that lingered in the room. Kine sat beside his mother, silent tears falling the first since their wedding day. Amara held him close, and together they listened to the wind brushing through the porch, carrying the scent of wet earth and banana flowers, Mama's favorite. 3 days later, they held a simple funeral. No long speeches, no heavy mourning, because Mama had once said, "When I go, don't call it a burial. Call it the day water returns to the clouds." After the service, Amara opened the envelope. Inside was a folded letter. the handwriting shaky but steady. My daughter, forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's remembering without the pain. I've come to see that the fire in you didn't destroy me. It saved me. Because through it, I rediscovered the human part of myself I had lost. When you read this, remember. Light doesn't come from the sky, it comes from a heart that knows how to bow. Use your hands to teach other women that boiling water can soften meat, but only kindness can soften destiny. I love you, Mama Ifeoma. Amara folded the letter back, tears wetting its edges. She looked up toward the sky. The clouds had parted, and a beam of golden light broke through the trees, touching the ground. Like a farewell from Mama, distant yet close enough to feel. That night, Amara boiled water again. She placed the brass kettle Mama had given her on the stove. Kane sat beside her, watching the flame. "Are you not afraid anymore?" he asked quietly. Amara shook her head, smiling. "No. Tonight I'm boiling water for the woman who taught me how to cool down." She brewed tea and poured it into 3 cups, one for herself, one for Kane, and one for Mama's photograph. The steam rose, carrying a soft fragrance through the room. "For you, Mama," she whispered. "So you'll know boiling water can still give birth to sweetness, if we're patient enough to let it cool." Kane reached out, took her hand. I still remember when she said, "True justice is when the one who did wrong learns how to love again." I think she's seeing that now. They sat in silence, watching the wisps of steam fade into the evening air. Outside, a night breeze stirred the leaves. It sounded almost like laughter. A year later, warm hands, not hot water, became a full community program. Women from all over Lagos, Abuja, even Atlanta came to hear Amara speak. She never told her story with sorrow, but with peace. She said, "Boiling water can burn the skin, but if tended with care, it can also cook the wounds until they're ready to heal." At the opening of their new kitchen, Amara hung 2 kettles on the wall, one old and dented, the other shining and new. Beneath them was an engraving. Fire was never born to destroy, but to light the way for those who learn from their burns. As the ceremony ended, Amara walked out to the garden. The sunset painted her face in gold and crimson. She could feel warmth running through her veins, no longer boiling, just steady, like love that had learned to rest. She whispered, "Mama, the water in my heart no longer boils." A soft wind rustled the door, and the brass kettle caught the last glow of daylight, shimmering gold, gentle and alive, like Mama's smile still lingering somewhere near. Amara closed her eyes, filled with gratitude. She finally understood. Every fire in life, whether it burns or warms, is sent to teach the heart how to love more kindly. If you believe that no pain is wasted, and that light can rise from ashes, comment, "Believe." Because Amara's story might just be your story too. Some stories end with applause, but Amara's story ended in silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the stillness that comes when 2 souls have finally learned to look at each other with compassion. Amara once believed her life was defined by one mistake, one heated moment that destroyed everything. But fire doesn't only destroy, it refines. Just as gold only shines after the furnace, a human being only becomes whole after daring to face the ashes within. Mama Ifeoma had once thought that power came from being the loudest voice in the room. But in the end, she discovered that true power is not making others fear you, it's moving them to tenderness. When 2 generations of women lower their voices and sit together, something miraculous happens. They don't just forgive each other, they free every woman who comes after them from the cycle of pain and silence. This story isn't really about boiling water. It's about the heat of pride and wounds that refuse to cool. Boiling water can burn the skin, but cruel words can burn the soul. And if fire can destroy, then tears, the gentlest thing of all, can heal. When Mama passed, Amara realized forgiveness isn't a gift for others. It's the armor that protects one's own heart. She learned to cook her life again with softer fire, warmer hands, and a light no longer fierce, but steady. So if you carry a burn inside you, whether caused by someone you loved or by your own mistakes, remember this. Every flame can become light, if you learn where to place it. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it only takes away its power to hurt you. If you feel that truth in your heart, comment "light" and help keep the lamp of kindness burning in every soul that listens to stories like this one.